that if you're a researcher and you gather this information, you know, it's basically like a forensic detective. You gather the evidence slowly and patiently, and soon it comes into focus. It comes into focus. What is really going on in the world. But long before Dennis Healy, we have Lord Beaconsfield, Benjamin Disraeli. He was actually the first Jewish Prime Minister of England back between 1874 and 1880. He was extremely closely associated with the Rothschild dynasty and was also a favorite of Queen Victoria, no less. And he never stopped talking, both in his fictional work and in his daily life, about what he would describe as the network of conspiratorial organizations. And again, he's a very high-level person. I mean, this guy was the sort of favorite of Queen Victoria, had open audience to her, and she confided in him. And his work, Coningsby, he says that there is no error so vulgar as to believe that revolutions are occasioned by economic causes. And you know how pertinent it is today when you see so-called economic meltdowns and all the rest of it, to bear in mind what these insiders are talking about. What we'll be discussing is not only psychic dictatorship, but when you break it down, when you start getting into the sort of the anatomy of psychic dictatorship, you find out that it's really about hierarchy, control, and enslavement. And I've talked a lot about hierarchy in several other works, particularly the Brotherhood of Death interview series that we did on Red Eyes Creations, and on the Origins and Oracles series I did, and also in Program 1 of Architects of Control. We talked about it. It's very important to understand the difference, you see, between hierarchy and holarchy. Very important. And also to realize that hierarchical thinking, when you take it to its extreme, as I said in these other works, is actually a definition of psychopathy, by the way.
Excuse me, what do you say? Hierarchy and what was another?
Holarchy. Holarchy. Yeah. Like a hologram. Yeah. It's just like a holarchy. It's mostly a compare it in your mind to a sphere, right? As opposed to, say, a pyramid. There's two different worldviews. You know how the quantum scientists and the mystics are always saying, see in the part the whole, right? And in the whole is the part, right? This is the holarchic model. In fact, there's the pyramid right there. The people, and in Program 2 and 3, we'll be dealing with the secret society symbolism, and you're going to see the pyramid and the triangle a lot. Not that pyramids and triangles are evil, but the fact is they symbolize something. And don't forget that in the lexicon, in the archive of these controllers, of these architects of control, everything that they say, that they do, and that they design has an esoteric meaning, and they're happy to tell you that. That's what these symbols mean. They're telling you something there. The dates, the colors, the symbols that they use are saying, we're not speaking to you in words. And everything we do in design has esoteric meaning that's only for the initiates. And this includes symbols and words. This is how these black lodges operate. We know that in wartime you have to use ciphers, and sometimes you have to change the cipher many times in case the enemy's catching up to break your code, isn't it? So they have their own symbolic code. Actually, they stole it from the Druids and from the earlier schools of light. But let's leave that aside for now and just realize that they are using this symbolism. And it's very much in their blood. And as I said, it goes for symbols and words. And then somebody says to me, yeah, well, I looked up the word Hebrew in the dictionary, Majkl, and it doesn't say what you said it means. You're wrong. You're going to dictionaries? Who created those? You don't know that that is the official source? We're not talking about that. We're talking about the connotative, esoteric meanings of a lot of words that obviously are not going to be found in official sources for the very purpose that they don't want you to know that. So when they put the words in the official dictionaries, they're trying to tell you that that is the official meaning of that word. That's dictatorship. No, it isn't. And behind those dictionaries are the etymological dictionaries, and behind that is even a deeper study of words that goes all the way back into the esoteric tradition. But the dictionary is basically an authority that's trying to say, we have defined the meaning of this word. And therefore, those people who only feel that's where they need to go, are going to learn nothing. The moment that you realize about this esoteric level, right, you'll go far. Because that's when the journey begins. In names, places, titles, for instance. It's really magnificent when you open that door. Those dictionaries, of course, are valuable. They can be used, but it's only a starting point. Of course, as I said, they're telling you this now. They're telling you it loud and clear in the last decade or so, more than ever before, by certain movies coming out. As I said, they want you to know that that everything they've created has an esoteric value, right, and a meaning. They want you to know that now. And through some of the movies that they're putting out, that's partly what is going on in those films. Where a certain protagonist or a heroic character, you see, is now going to be some sort of expert on the esoteric. Some sort of detective, Indiana Jones type, you see, who's brought in, and we watch. And these are great dramas. I'm not saying they're not fascinating entertainment. But what's going on, what's being told there? We're being led, right, through the maze by a certain Pied Piper who's now acclimatizing us to the fact that, the official meanings of certain things, that's out the door. Hey, we're going to probe into all of this. And then Hollywood comes along and goes, oh, that's great. We can really do well with that kind of idea. Oh, we're happy to know about this esoteric stuff. That makes good business, good films. Very interesting, fascinating. Everyone wants to know about mysteries. So then they present some to you. However, since we are actually fundamentally dealing with psychic dictatorship, and also awakening, as Peter said, the world's awakening, and as I said, selfhood, we have to understand one simple fact, and that is that the architects of control, the Black Lodge, they're not interested in the latter of those two things. They're not interested in the world's awakening, and they're certainly not interested in selfhood, but they certainly are very interested in psychic dictatorship. So then what? What do we do then? We've got to realize that these people, the reason why they're not interested in it is because they are the least self-aware people imaginable. They are very much in their ego. In fact, they're not even really in a healthy ego. They're in what you might want to call malignant narcissism. And they're collectivists. They're into hive mentality. They're into groupthink. That's partly what that pyramid's all about. Right? That's the hive. The mitres that the popes wear. The beehive symbol in Masonry. They're all about the collective hive, where you're basically a shard, a broken self, an ego that relies on everybody else. You're part of a collective. You're not an individual. That's why they're against individuality. They don't have it themselves, because, to use a euphemism from Professor Tolkien, they've given themselves over to the shadow. They have given themselves over to the shadow. They are the ring. They wear the ring. Now, ring has many meanings. A ring can also mean a ring, a cabal of people. Right? One ring to rule them all. Check out the logos of the United Nations and the EU. You'll see a ring. Now, these people have given themselves over to that darkness, that Christians might want to use the word possessed. And therefore, they're not interested, and never ever will be, right, into things that we're discussing here today. Champion of the aforesaid, Edward Bernays, who should know, he says, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. Now note that he didn't say free the masses. He's not talking about enlighten the masses. Right? The operative word there is control, regiment the masses. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power in the country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. We are dominated by a relatively small number of persons. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind and who harness social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. And then you're telling me there's no conspiracy? They're the highest people in the lackeys are telling you absolutely there is one. Long time before the Bernays,